What if the most powerful weapon in the ancient world wasn't a sword or a spear, but a box? The Bible describes a golden chest that could part rivers, crumble fortress walls, and kill a man instantly if he touched it. For centuries, it was the ultimate symbol of divine power. And then, it vanished. Now, scientists and historians are asking a shocking question. Were the prophets describing a miracle, or were they witnessing advanced technology they couldn't understand? This is the hunt for the truth behind the Ark of the Covenant. Except this one shows up in books treated as a historical record. Some swore it was God's throne on earth. Others whisper it was something else entirely, like advanced tech way out of place for the time. And here's the crazy part. After all that hype, after centuries of being paraded around as the single most important object on earth, it just disappears. No wreckage, no stolen fragments, no evidence it was ever destroyed, just gone. You don't just misplace something that supposedly fried people alive for getting too close. So, what happened? Was it really holy? Was it some kind of ancient machine? Or was it so dangerous it had to vanish on purpose? The Ark of the Covenant has been described as many things: a sacred chest, a throne for the invisible, a vessel that carried God's very presence. Whatever it was unlike anything else in ancient Israel. And then, after centuries of central importance, it simply vanished from history more than 2,500 years ago. Since then, it has lived on in whispers, speculation, and endless searching. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Ark was built at God's command, given directly to Moses. Nothing about its construction was left vague. It had to be made from acacia wood and covered entirely with pure gold inside and out, leaving no trace of bare wood. Even its size was spelled out. 212 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. That's about 45x 27x 27 in. Not very large, really. About the size of a modest trunk, yet treated as if it held the key to the universe. A gold molding ran around its edge, giving it a regal outline. For transport, 4 rings of gold were attached to its corners, 2 on each side. Poles of acacia wood, also sheathed in gold, were slid through these rings, and once inserted, were never to be removed. The actual job of building it went to Bezalel and Aholiab, not Moses. They were said to be divinely gifted in skill and knowledge. Imagine being told your hands would build the object where God's presence would permanently be. That must have been both terrifying and/or inspiring. The Ark's most striking feature wasn't the box itself, but the lid, known as the mercy seat. It was hammered out of solid gold and placed on top as its crowning feature. On each end, there was a golden cherub with its wings stretched up and forward until they met in the middle. They faced each other with their eyes lowered toward the empty space between them. That space was the true focal point, the place where, according to the text, God would appear and speak to Moses. The cherubim were more than ornaments. In Near Eastern art, divine thrones were often flanked by creatures like sphinxes or winged guardians. The Ark's cherubim seemed to continue that same tradition, serving as a symbolic throne for God. Inside the Ark rested what were considered the most sacred objects of Israel's faith. First were the stone tablets of the law, inscribed with the 10 commandments from Mount Sinai. These were called the testimony, the physical sign of God's covenant. Later, other items were placed inside as well. Among them was a golden jar filled with manna, the mysterious food that sustained the Israelites in the wilderness. There was also Aaron's rod, which had once budded with life as a sign of his priestly authority. These objects were more than relics. They told stories, each one reminding Israel of divine power, provision, and chosen leadership. The Ark's presence was not meant to be symbolic alone. It was treated as a real force of power. Carried into battle, it was said to bring victory. Mishandled, it could bring disaster. Touched by those who were not authorized, it could even bring death. At the heart of it all was the belief that the Ark was not just a container, but a throne, a meeting place between heaven and earth. The Ark was built with wood and gold, but the people who carried it believed it contained something invisible, yet overwhelming. Stories of the Ark never read like simple history. They carry a sense that something extraordinary was at play, as if the chest itself was alive with power. For the Israelites, it was more than a sacred object. It was a sign that God walked with them, guided them, and fought for them. and the stories linked to it are as strange as anything in scripture. The priests carrying the ark stepped into the rushing water. In that instant, the river ceased to flow, completely halting its current. The Israelites were able to cross on dry land, as if the water had never been there at all. This wasn't just a coincidence. The ark, as a physical object, seemed to carry with it a power that could control the natural world. It feels almost like a mirror of the Red Sea crossing, as if the ark itself held the power to repeat that earlier feat. Then there's the fall of Jericho. The ark was carried around the city walls once each day for 6 days, led by a procession of armed men and priests blowing horns made from rams. On the 7th day, they made the circuit 7 times, and then after a deafening shout, the city's towering walls collapsed. It seems almost like a scene from an epic play, a strange mix of silence and noise, ritual and military power. But what stands out in the story is the undeniable centrality of the ark in this seemingly impossible victory. It was a solid gold-covered relic, carried in solemn silence, and then suddenly surrounded by the loud, chaotic sound of horns and shouting. And with that, it was as if the ark itself had the power to shatter the most fortified walls in the region. Other accounts show the ark acting less like a blessing and more like a curse. When the Philistines captured it in battle, they paraded it into the temple of their god, Dagon. But the next morning, Dagon's statue was flat on its face before the ark. The day after, its head and hands had snapped off. On top of that, the Philistines were struck by tumors and plagued with rats. The Philistines were afflicted so much that they sent the ark back as quickly as they could, returning it with golden offerings to make peace. But even among the Israelites, the ark was dangerous if approached without reverence. Let's talk about the story of Uzzah, who reached out to steady it when the cart carrying it shook. The moment his hand touched it, he dropped dead. It feels almost cruel to modern ears, but for them, it confirmed that the ark was not just a container, but a holy presence that demanded strict boundaries. In contrast, when the ark was kept for 3 months in the house of a man named Obed-Edom, something remarkable happened. His family thrived and everything seemed to go right for him. It was as if the ark brought good fortune wherever it was respected and cared for, but in places where it was mishandled or disrespected, bad things quickly followed. The trail of the ark through history grows hazy after King Josiah's reign around 640 to 609 BCE. According to the scriptures, Josiah tells the Levites to put the holy ark back into the temple Solomon had built, which makes it sound like it had been taken out for a time. Maybe earlier kings removed it to make space for their idols. Maybe it was shifted during renovations, or maybe Josiah was using his command to reassure people that the ark was still there. Even if it wasn't. The text leaves the door open, and that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the mystery alive. Then came the disaster of 587 BCE, when the Babylonians stormed Jerusalem, burned Solomon's temple, and carried off its treasures. Detailed records survive, listing everything taken as spoils. The ark isn't on the list. That absence speaks volumes. Did it vanish before the invasion? Was it hidden away, spirited off to safety, or was it destroyed and deliberately left unmentioned? Scholars have argued every possibility. In the end, the answer likely lies between the accounts we have and the gaps they leave. At first glance, the Ark of the Covenant might appear to be just another powerful mystical object from ancient scriptures. But what if there's more to it than that? What if those biblical writers were describing real effects without understanding the science behind them? That's the starting point for one of the most intriguing theories. The idea that the Ark of the Covenant wasn't only holy, but also highly technological. The theory has roots in the Ark's design itself. According to the descriptions, it was built from acacia wood and covered completely with pure gold inside and out. To the faithful, that detail was about beauty and holiness. To engineers, though, it looks suspiciously like the blueprint of an electrical device. In fact, Frederick Rogers, a dean of electrical engineering back in 1933, studied the Ark's construction and concluded that it resembled a condenser, which today we call a capacitor. It seems absurd at first, an ancient capacitor sitting in the desert carried on poles by priests. Not exactly what comes to mind when you think of Moses, but the logic is straightforward. Gold conducts electricity. Wood, especially acacia, makes a decent insulator. Put gold on both sides of a wooden layer, and you've got the basic structure of a capacitor, the same principle that powers devices in every electronics lab today. And then there were the cherubim on top, two golden figures with wings raised and facing one another. Some argue these could have functioned like terminals, the positive poles of the circuit. If that sounds like a stretch, consider how such a thing might have charged. Without power lines or batteries, nature itself would have had to do the work. And nature, when it comes to electricity, doesn't mess around. The theory suggests the ark could have drawn energy from the natural difference between earth and sky, from the rising heat of sacrifices and incense, and most dramatically, from lightning. Ancient texts describe a pillar of smoke by day and fire by night resting over the tabernacle. To believers, that was God's presence. To others, it could have been a pyrocumulonimbus, the kind of storm cloud that produces lightning strikes. Imagine a gold-covered chest crackling with the force of lightning, charged with an ominous power. I can almost see a priest approaching it with caution, knowing that one wrong move meant disaster. Remember the death of Uzzah? It fits neatly into this frame. When the ark wobbled on a cart, he reached out to steady it and fell dead instantly. Scripture says God struck him down. Electrical theorists say the ark discharged its stored energy into his body, and physics makes it plausible. A container with the ark's dimensions could have stored enough energy to kill if released at once. Imagine 10,000 volts discharging in an instant. That's not divine wrath in their eyes. Now, that would be lethal. Even the accounts of fire from heaven burning offerings make sense in this light. The texts describe holy fire leaping out to consume sacrifices at the altar. Could that have been a sudden electrical arc, the kind of discharge that jumps from a live wire to anything grounded? To the ancients, it would have looked like fire from God. To modernize, it looks a lot like a high-voltage spark. The idea doesn't stop there. Every detail about how the ark was handled takes on new meaning. When read through an engineering lens, the Levites were instructed never to touch it directly. It was wrapped in skins and cloths when moved. It was kept in total darkness when not in use. Those aren't just rituals in this reading. They're safety procedures, the kind you'd find in an electrical lab. And then there were the clothes of the high priest. The special robe was woven with gold thread mixed in with blue, purple, and red yarn. That design might have worked a bit like a simple Faraday cage, shielding the person wearing it from electric fields. The tiny gold bells stitched along the bottom jingled with every step. And they may have acted like a grounding wire, letting any built-up charge safely drain away. It's kind of like priestly gear doubled as safety equipment, like the first ever lab coat. When the texts warn Aaron and his sons to wear these garments so they wouldn't die, theorists see not just spiritual caution, but explicit safety instructions. If they entered without the right gear, they risked exposure to high voltage. And when Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu were killed after bringing strange fire into the sanctuary, some suggest they died not because of sacrilege, but because they ignored electrical safety rules. Other passages fit just the same. The ark sometimes seemed to grow lighter when carried, almost lifting itself. Let's relate this to modern physics. An object charged negatively can repel the negatively charged ground beneath it. If true, the ark might have reduced its own weight through electrostatic repulsion. That sounds wild, but it's a neat explanation for why men could carry a chest supposedly covered in solid gold without collapsing. There's even speculation about the tablets of the law themselves. Some fringe theorists have suggested that they weren't just stone slabs, but possibly early electrical devices, something like a Tesla coil or a spark generator. On top of that, the cherubim on the ark's mercy seat are thought to have acted as the terminals of a Tesla coil powered by the ark's stored charge. A Tesla coil can create high-voltage lightning discharges, or if the charge isn't strong enough, produce a violet glow. If this theory holds any weight, it would explain some of the mysterious phenomena attributed to the ark. Of course, all this presumes Moses knew something about advanced science. How could he have? Well, according to some theories, his background in Egypt might hold the key. Raised in the royal household, possibly trained as a priest, Moses would have had access to Egypt's deepest knowledge. If Egypt preserved fragments of technology from an even older world, then Moses might have been the one man who could carry that knowledge forward. I'll admit, I don't know how far to take that. Egypt was advanced, yes, but was it experimenting with high-voltage electricity? We have scraps of evidence like the so-called Baghdad battery and odd temple carvings that some say depict light bulbs. Maybe those are stretches too, maybe not. But what's fascinating is how smoothly the Ark stories slip into this framework. Sudden death, strange fire, blessings, and curses. To those in ancient times, it was the hand of God. To us, it's technology that seems far too advanced for its era. On top of what we already know, there are other things about the Ark that have people wondering if science and technology were at play. Take the Philistines, for example. When they seized the Ark, the story goes that whole communities broke out in tumors. Sickness swept through their towns, and even their god Dagon was found face down and shattered before it. Then came the invasion of rats that ravaged their land, which some point to as signs of bubonic plague. Yet some researchers argue these weren't plagues at all, at least not in the ordinary sense. They say the Philistines showed symptoms of radiation poisoning, tumors, hair falling out, and fingernails loosening, matching. These align more closely with the effects of prolonged exposure to radiation than with divine punishment. Additionally, the Bible recounts incidents where people who came too close to or touched the Ark died, sometimes a week or two later. The symptoms included boils on the skin and hair falling out. Ancient astronaut theorists like Giorgio A. Tsoukalos interpret these symptoms as a sign of radioactive poisoning or fallout. They proposed that the Ark could have contained highly advanced technology, which might explain these strange and deadly effects. Roger Isaacs, a biblical researcher, even suggested that many of the strict laws given to the Hebrews, especially those surrounding how the Ark should be approached, were in fact protective measures against radiation exposure from a cloud that descended upon it. And then, there are the grand displays of force with the Ark. The River Jordan stopped flowing as the Ark was carried to its banks. The walls of Jericho collapsed after the Ark circled the city alongside blasts of the ram's horn. Was this sheer miracle? Or could it have been something like resonance, an unseen frequency shaking the very stones loose? Some argue the Ark may have acted as a sonic device, amplifying vibrations until structures gave way. Some of the theories about the Ark stretch even further, beyond radiation or sonic energy into something otherworldly. A group of writers and researchers argues that the Ark, along with the stone tablets inside, may not have been a human invention at all. They frame it as a piece of technology handed down from somewhere else, possibly extraterrestrial. Might sound like a big leap, but once you hear the reasoning, it starts to seem less like a wild guess and more like a riddle that refuses to go away. The Bible's descriptions of the Ark are so surprisingly specific, it suggested they read more like the specs of a machine. If so, then what sort of machine could be hiding inside a gilded wooden chest? According to this theory, something far beyond the reach of Bronze Age craftsmen. That's where figures like David Hatcher Childress come in. Childress is one of the prominent voices on the show Ancient Aliens, a popular series that explores the idea that extraterrestrial beings visited Earth in ancient times and influenced human civilization. In his interpretation of the Ark of the Covenant, Childress suggests it wasn't just a religious relic, but a powerful device, possibly extraterrestrial in origin. He paints the Ark as a dangerous powerhouse capable of emitting deadly bolts of energy, killing those who mishandled it. He even goes as far as to say that the Ark might have been able to lift itself, guiding the Israelites through the desert, powered by an unknown, possibly alien technology. And if you think about it, what if ancient descriptions were simply the best way people at the time could capture an encounter with advanced tech? Erich von Däniken took that stance decades ago. His book, Chariots of the Gods, in 1968 cracked open the notion that extraterrestrials had a hand in shaping early human civilizations. He didn't tiptoe around it either. In his view, the Ark's baffling powers were not miraculous at all, but evidence of a non-terrestrial device. Von Däniken and other ancient astronaut theorists emphasize the specific instructions given by God to Moses on how the Ark was to be made. Von Däniken argues that this level of detail suggests the Ark wasn't just a religious object, but a piece of technology, possibly far beyond what the Israelites would have been capable of creating on their own. For supporters of this theory, the Ark belongs in the category of so-called out-of-place artifacts, objects that seem too advanced for the time in which they supposedly appeared. And when you look at it through that lens, the Ark shifts from a relic of faith to a puzzle piece that might not fit neatly into human history at all. So, where exactly is the Ark right now? Well, it depends on which version you believe. Let's start with this man. It's one thing to wonder if the Ark survived at all. It's another when someone stands up and says, "Not only do I know where it is, but I have seen it with my own eyes." That was the claim of Ron Wyatt, a man whose name has caused both fascination and outrage in equal measure. Wyatt was not a professor or a career archaeologist. He worked as a nurse and anesthetist. On paper, there was nothing about him that suggested he would one day announce he had found one of the holiest relics of all time. Yet, beginning in the late 1970s, he made it his mission to track down biblical treasures, and the most extraordinary of these pursuits came to a head in the early 1980s. According to Wyatt, while walking near the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem in 1982, something inexplicable happened. His arm, without his conscious control, lifted and pointed toward a rocky escarpment. Words slipped out of his mouth before he could think. That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there. You can imagine how startling that must have felt. Wyatt said an Israeli official who was with him at the time granted immediate permission to excavate the area. Not only permission, but also practical support. Food, lodging, workers, the whole package. No bureaucratic hurdles, no endless paperwork, just an open invitation to dig into the side of the hill known as the Calvary Escarpment, right by the traditional site of the crucifixion. As the digging began, Wyatt claimed he and his helpers broke through into a hidden system of tunnels. Twisting passageways eventually led them about 20 ft below ground into a chamber so packed with stones and rubble that the ceiling nearly touched the debris. Buried within, he said, were temple artifacts draped in animal skins as if someone had carefully stored them away long ago. In the farthest corner of this chamber, something stood out. A large stone box with its lid cracked open. The walls of the box were a little over an inch thick. Inside, according to Wyatt, was the Ark itself. That gold-covered acacia chest with its golden molding, the mercy seat on top, and the two-winged cherubim facing each other. He even cited its measurements in cubits, which matched the biblical descriptions. The claim didn't stop there. Wyatt said other items were also in the chamber: the altar of burnt offerings, the table of showbread, golden candlesticks, sacred furnishings that once stood in Solomon's temple, all hidden away in the secret cavern. What was not in the Ark, he pointed out, were the pot of manna and Aaron's rod, but the tablets of the 10 Commandments, those he insisted were still inside. His sons who worked with him at the site reportedly did not know the exact location of the Ark chamber, as Wyatt was concerned about people dying if they looked for it. Wyatt described one detail that for him sealed the significance of the find. On the cracked lid of the stone box and on the mercy seat of the Ark, there was a dark substance, thick, dried, black. He believed it was blood, not just any blood, but the very blood of Christ. Wyatt told it like this: when Jesus was crucified above, the earthquake described in Scripture split the rock. The fissure ran down through the escarpment and into this hidden chamber, and in that moment, blood and water from the spear wound in Christ's side, seeped through the crack and dripped directly onto the mercy seat of the Ark, a physical link between the Old Covenant and the New. For Wyatt, this was not just symbolism. He saw it as the literal fulfillment of prophecy from the book of Daniel, where the most holy place would be anointed. Wyatt then claimed he collected samples of the dried substance and had them tested at a Jerusalem lab. The report, according to him, showed the blood was still alive. Even more startling, he said it contained only 24 chromosomes. Normally, human cells have 46. Wyatt explained it as 23 from the mother and a single Y chromosome from no human father. To him, it was scientific proof of a virgin birth. The scientific community never saw the lab report, nor were the samples independently verified. Yet for Wyatt, the implications were so clear, he didn't feel he needed outside validation. And then come the angels. Wyatt spoke of returning to the chamber later and finding it completely transformed. Where once it had been filled with debris, now everything was cleared away. The ark and its companion objects arranged neatly in view. 4 angels, he said, stood around the ark as its guardians. They had been there, according to him, for over 2,600 years, ever since Jeremiah hid the ark before the Babylonian conquest. The angels gave him instructions. They let him film what he saw, but warned him not to release the footage until the appointed time. He even said they handed him the tablets of stone from inside the ark and told him they would be revealed to the world when prophecy aligned with history. Wyatt even tied the timing of its eventual revelation to specific conditions. According to him, once certain religious laws were enacted, particularly one involving Sunday worship, the ark would be brought out, the tablets displayed, and his footage made public. Until then, the chamber would remain sealed, watched over by its angelic guardians. Wyatt also described finding charcoal remains in the grotto, which he took as evidence that Jeremiah had lived there. While preparing the hiding place, he insisted the chamber was not built by human hands, but was a natural cave designed by God for this very purpose. He amassed a following, drawing in people who were fascinated by his claims and eager to see proof of the biblical past. After he died in 1999, his supporters sought to preserve his legacy by establishing a museum in Tennessee dedicated to his work and discoveries. This became the Wyatt Archaeological Museum, a place where visitors could view what he presented as evidence of the Bible's greatest events. From Wyatt's chamber beneath Jerusalem, the story moves far beyond Israel and into Ethiopia, where another claim has taken hold. At the center of it is the city of Axum, sometimes written Axum, a place with a long reputation for mystery and sacred history. It was the first state in sub-Saharan Africa to adopt Christianity officially, and its monuments still rise in stone, as if they were waiting to outlast time itself. UNESCO calls it a World Heritage Site. Locals call it something more. They call it the cradle of their faith. At the heart of Axum stands the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. For centuries, Ethiopians have said that within its grounds rests the most sacred object in biblical history, the Ark of the Covenant. Not a replica, not a symbolic stand-in, the real Ark. The original church was said to have been built in the 4th century during the reign of King Azana, the first Christian ruler of the Aksumite kingdom. Since then, the building has been destroyed, rebuilt, extended, and even honored by Emperor Haile Selassie, who brought Queen Elizabeth II to inaugurate a modern basilica beside it in the 1960s. Yet, the story that draws pilgrims there has never shifted. The Ark, they believe, has been here all along. Now that is not a rumor whispered by a few monks. It is a national conviction enshrined in a book that is as central to Ethiopia's history as the Bible itself. The Kebra Nagast, written down in the 14th century, is a sprawling text that tells how the Ark left Jerusalem and ended up in Ethiopia. Scholars argue it was crafted to legitimize the Solomonic dynasty that seized power in the 1200s. But for Ethiopian Christians, it is no invention. It is truth, identity, and destiny bound into one. It all begins with the Queen of Sheba, whom Ethiopians call Makeda. According to the stories, she heard of King Solomon's wisdom through a merchant named Tamrin. Intrigued, she made the journey to Jerusalem to see for herself. The Kebra Nagast describes how Solomon tricked Makeda into spending the night with him. She had sworn not to take anything from his house, but when he made her unbearably thirsty, she reached for water. By breaking the oath, she allowed Solomon to claim her. From this union, their son Menelik was born on her return journey to Ethiopia. When Menelik came of age, he traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father. Solomon, delighted, wanted him to stay and rule Israel, but Menelik refused. He wanted to return to his mother's land. To ease the parting, Solomon assigned the firstborn sons of Israelite nobles to accompany him. These young men were less than thrilled. Leaving Jerusalem meant abandoning their home, their temple, and their God's dwelling place. So, they hatched a plan. Without Menelik's knowledge, they stole the Ark of the Covenant. They replaced it with a decoy, a box of wood hidden under the Ark's coverings. One of them, Azarias, son of the high priest Zadok, claimed he was guided by an angel who instructed him to take the Ark because Israel had angered God. When the men found that the sanctuary doors swung open without resistance, they saw it as divine approval. By the time Menelik discovered the theft, the ark was already with them on the road to Ethiopia. He decided to accept it as God's will. The ark, after all, had shown no destructive power against his companions. Instead, its presence seemed to confirm their mission. Ethiopia, not Israel, would now carry God's chosen favor. That is the Ethiopian claim, and it has held for centuries. According to this tradition, the ark was placed in a sanctuary in Axum and has remained there ever since. Some say this shift of divine favor was foreshadowed by a dream Solomon had, in which the sun left Israel and settled over Ethiopia. So, what about today? If you walk into Axum, you can visit the grounds of the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Next to it stands a modest stone building known as the Chapel of the Tablet. Locals will tell you matter-of-factly that the Ark of the Covenant rests inside that exact chapel. You will not see it. You will not even get close. Only one man on earth is allowed inside, a monk known as the Guardian. This guardian monk spends his life tending to the ark, offering prayers and incense, chanting psalms, and never leaving the compound again. Once he is chosen, usually by the outgoing guardian, his life narrows into this role until he dies. His replacement takes his place and the cycle continues. To the outside world, the secrecy makes verification impossible, but to Ethiopians, that secrecy is sacred. They call the ark Tabata Seyon, the Ark of Zion, and its influence radiates far beyond that chapel. Every single Ethiopian Orthodox church contains a tablet, a small replica of the ark's tablets. No church can be consecrated without one. These replicas are wrapped in cloth hidden from casual view and brought out only for the most important ceremonies. During Timkat, the celebration of Epiphany, they are carried in procession through the streets, echoing ancient Jewish traditions of carrying the ark before the people. What makes Ethiopia so intriguing is that the ark is only the beginning. Their connection to sacred history is also tied to the Bible they kept, a Bible that stood out because of the books it contained and the way it was preserved. It was seen as too unusual, too far removed from what other authorities wanted, and in time, it was banned. That part of Ethiopia's story is just as mysterious as the ark itself, and I've already gone into it in a separate video. I'll put a link below if you're interested. Nonetheless, some scholars disagree with the theory of Ethiopia having the Ark of the Covenant. Some believe it is north toward Jordan. The second book of Maccabees, a text written about a century before the Common Era, tells that the prophet Jeremiah received a message from above. Acting on it, he gathered the ark, the tent of meeting, and the altar of incense, and took them to a mountain that already carried deep weight in Israel's memory, Mount Nebo, the same place Moses had once climbed to gaze at the land he would never enter. According to the tale, Jeremiah found a cave there, sealed the sacred treasures inside, and left no markers behind. When his companions tried to retrace the steps, they got lost. He scolded them, declaring the ark would not be revealed until God chose to gather his people again and show them mercy. At that moment, the Lord's glory would appear once more in a cloud, just as it had in Moses' time, and just as it had at Solomon's shrine. In other words, the ark was not gone, it was only waiting. The image of the ark locked away beneath Mount Nebo has gripped imaginations for 2,000 years. Pilgrims travel there even now, though official digs are rare, and the Jordanian authorities keep a sharp eye on looters who sometimes try their luck under the cover of night. But that hasn't stopped bold claims. Tom Kreutzer appeared with his own story. He too claimed the ark was at Nebo in the 1980s. He even presented blurry photographs that he insisted showed the sacred chest hidden among the rocks. Supporters pointed to his daring expedition as proof that he had uncovered something extraordinary. Kreutzer stood by his claim, though for many it simply deepened the disputes surrounding where the ark might be. Now, while the Mount Nebo account draws attention east of the Jordan, others insist the ark never left Jerusalem at all. For them, the true hiding place lies beneath the Temple Mount. It is one of the most contested patches of ground on Earth, which makes it the perfect place for an artifact that seems to thrive on secrecy. According to Jewish tradition, priests may have hidden the ark there long before the Babylonians came knocking. Some say in a chamber, others insist on a tunnel system. Either way, it was meant to be out of reach. I find it interesting that this isn't just a rumor or modern speculation. There are old rabbinic accounts that take the idea very seriously. King Josiah, for example, is often credited with stashing the ark in anticipation of the temple's fall. He wasn't improvising either. According to certain commentators, King Solomon had already designed secret passages beneath the temple for exactly this reason. If true, Josiah simply used what was already there. The Tosefta, a rabbinic work from the 2nd century, even goes so far as to say the ark was stored with other sacred items. That detail makes it sound less like panic and more like a carefully executed plan. What adds weight to this theory is the silence of history. When the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 587 BC, they carried off a staggering list of treasures. The Bible itself names them, and yet not a whisper about the ark. If they had captured it, it would have been paraded around like a prize pig at a fair. The Romans bragged about seizing the menorah from the Second Temple. Why would the Babylonians not shout from the rooftops if they had the ark? The absence of any such boasting makes a lot of people think the ark wasn't taken at all. Either it was destroyed in the chaos, or it was hidden inside the walls of Jerusalem before the first battering ram struck. Fast forward to modern times and archaeology steps into the picture. Leon Rittmeyer, an archaeologist and architect, did a painstaking survey of the Temple Mount. He identified a rectangular depression in the bedrock at the heart of the rocky mass under the Dome of the Rock. The Holy of Holies is believed to have stood there. This depression measures 4.4 by 2.7. And yes, those measurements line up perfectly with the ark's dimensions, including space for the carrying poles. It is like finding a footprint with no shoe to match it. Of course, not everyone agrees that this depression is proof of anything. Some see it as an ordinary cut in the stone. But the idea that the ark once sat there, or maybe still sits below in some hidden cavity, has kept people busy for decades. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has doubled down on this conviction. Their entire mission revolves around preparing for the rebuilding of the Jewish temple, and they argue that the ark is not lost at all. They believe it is resting beneath the Temple Mount, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. It is not a treasure hunt in their eyes. It is destiny on pause. Things got even more interesting in 1981 when a group of Israeli rabbis led by Yehuda Getz reportedly conducted a secret excavation beneath the Temple Mount. They were convinced that with another year and a half of digging, they would find the chamber containing the ark. The whole project came to a grinding halt once word leaked to the public. Political and religious outrage was immediate. The rabbis were forced to stop, leaving behind unfinished tunnels and 1,000 questions. While many focus on the Temple Mount, another lead takes us to the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, a group of Bedouin shepherds made an accidental discovery that would change history when they uncovered the first of the scrolls hidden in desert caves. Most of those scrolls were delicate works of parchment filled with prayers, laws, and fragments of scripture. But one stood apart. Instead of being written in ink, its words had been hammered into sheets of copper. The copper scroll, as it came to be known, was less a sermon and more a ledger. Instead of prophecy, it offered directions, 64 of them, to be exact. Each line described a different location where staggering amounts of gold and silver were supposedly hidden. When scholars ran the numbers, the hoard added up to the modern equivalent of nearly $2 billion. I remember pausing on that figure the first time I read it. $2 billion. That is not a private stash, that's state-level treasure, which naturally leads many to point straight at the Temple of Jerusalem, the only place in the region with wealth on that kind of scale. The scroll also mentioned vessels and implements of gold and silver, phrases that immediately made researchers think of temple treasures. This is where the ark slips quietly into the conversation. True, it is not named outright, yet some argue that if the temple's wealth was being hidden from invaders, why would the most sacred object of all be left behind? Explorer Vendell Jones staked his reputation on that hunch, believing the copper scroll might be a coded treasure map with the ark tucked somewhere inside its long list of hiding spots. Some scholars even wonder if the copper scroll might be the very record mentioned in the second book of Maccabees, the one where Jeremiah sealed away the ark. If that is true, then those 64 locations are not just deposits of silver and gold. They are markers on a hidden map waiting for someone bold enough to follow it all the way through. The copper scrolls give us an unusual written clue, but not everyone looks to Israel for answers. Another theory suggests the ark was carried into Egypt. It's argued that Pharaoh Shishak carried the ark away after sacking Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE. That alone is enough to spark imaginations. But what really cemented the idea wasn't an ancient chronicle, it was Hollywood. In 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark threw gasoline on the fire. Suddenly, millions of people were seeing the ark not as a dusty relic locked away in scripture, but as a dangerous treasure worth chasing. The movie showed archaeologist Indiana Jones racing Nazi agents to find it before they could turn its otherworldly power into a weapon. When Jones finally discovered the Ark in the Egyptian city of Tanis, the story became bigger than history. It became pop culture. The success of the movie planted Egypt firmly in the Ark's mythos. People who had never cracked open a Bible suddenly knew about it. And because of Spielberg's touch, the theory of Shishak spiriting the Ark into Egypt gained a strange legitimacy. Whether the real Ark ever sat beneath Egyptian sands or not, one thing became certain. The story had entered modern myth, and it was never leaving. It is one thing to be swept up in the mystery of the Ark, but it is another to test the claims made about it. Plenty of people have stepped forward with astonishing stories, and yet time and again, those stories begin to crumble when put under real scrutiny. Take Ron Wyatt, for instance. Professional archaeologists, biblical scholars, and even those with strong Christian convictions dismiss his claims outright. Egyptologist Dr. David Falk went as far as calling his work junk archaeology. The central problem with Wyatt's version of events is simple. He never produced anything solid, no artifacts and no credible lab reports, not even a clear photograph. Whenever he explained why, the excuses shifted. Sometimes the footage was blurry, corrupted, and sometimes he said Israeli authorities silenced him to avoid triggering a Middle East war. I have to admit that one almost sounds like the plot of a political thriller. Other times, he claimed an angel himself forbade him from revealing the results. The sheer number of these explanations made critics all the more doubtful. Joe Zias of the Israel Antiquities Authority flatly denied that Wyatt was ever under such restrictions. In fact, Zias challenged him to hand over lab samples for independent testing, but Wyatt never delivered. Even the Garden Tomb Association, which had allowed him to dig on their property, later stated their staff had watched his work closely and saw nothing that supported his story. It is difficult not to notice the pattern here. Then there was the infamous blood claim. According to Wyatt, he found what he believed was the blood of Jesus, miraculously preserved and dripping onto the Ark's mercy seat through a crack caused by an earthquake. Biologists immediately pointed out the flaws. Human males cannot exist with the 24 chromosome pattern Wyatt described. DNA and blood decays within months, so the idea of pulling viable genetic material from a 2,000-year-old stain is beyond improbable. And from a theological angle, the story does not align with Passover rituals or New Testament accounts. In other words, both science and scripture were stacked against him. What weakened his case even further were his inconsistencies. One year he said the lab testing the blood was in Nashville. Another year he said it was in Jerusalem. As late as 1994, more than a decade after first announcing the discovery, he admitted the blood was still planning to be analyzed soon. That sort of delay might work for lost luggage, but not for evidence of the Ark. Wyatt also attached his name to other dramatic claims. He insisted he had located Noah's Ark, the site of the Red Sea crossing, and even ancient chariot wheels. Geologists and archaeologists reviewed each claim and found either natural rock formations or nothing at all. The twin ministers Colin and Russell Standish took it upon themselves to respond with a 300-page book, Holy Relics or Revelation, where they went point by point dismantling Wyatt's accounts. Many suspect Wyatt was driven partly by money. His Wyatt Archaeological Research Organization drew steady income from supporters eager to believe they were funding the rediscovery of biblical treasures. At the same time, some argue he was motivated by genuine conviction, a desire to prove the Bible through tangible finds. Perhaps it was a mix of both. What is clear is that his stories, however compelling to hear, collapse when asked to stand on their own. If Ron Wyatt's story raised eyebrows, Ethiopia's claim has inspired even more debate. The tale sounds beautiful on paper, a sacred chest hidden away in Axum, guarded day and night by a lone monk who never leaves his post. It feels like something straight out of legend, and perhaps that is exactly what it is. The problem, as scholars see it, is access. Nobody gets near the object except the guardian monk. No scientists, no archaeologists, no cameras. Without that, there is nothing to test, nothing to measure, nothing to confirm. I find it hard not to smile at the irony. We are told the Ark is there, but we are not allowed to look. That would test anyone's patience. The written source most often used to back up the claim is the Kebra Nagast. It is stirring, yes, but historians tend to read it less as a factual record and more as a blend of myth, theology, and politics. Some even argue it was pieced together in the 14th century to help a new dynasty prove its right to rule by linking itself to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. That sounds a lot less like history and a lot more like clever marketing. We also have Edward Ullendorf. In 1941, while stationed in Ethiopia, he claimed to have seen the supposed Ark in Axum. His verdict was blunt. A wooden box, empty, medieval, and nothing more. If he was right, the grand relic so carefully guarded was only a replica. And replicas are everywhere in Ethiopia. Every church has one. Not everyone agrees that the Ark ever existed. Clifford Mark McCormick, a scholar known for his book Palace and Temple, a study of architectural and verbal icons, openly questions its historicity. For him, the biblical descriptions may not point to an actual object at all, but to theological symbolism or even an elaborate piece of fiction. And then we arrive at the science explanations which stretch things to their limit. Frederick Rogers once proposed that the Ark was a giant capacitor capable of storing lethal amounts of electricity. On paper, yes, its described dimensions could allow for about 50 joules of charge at 10,000 volts, enough to deliver a nasty jolt, maybe even fatal. But here's the catch. To gather that kind of charge naturally would take around 10,000 years of sitting perfectly undisturbed. But remember that the Ark was always on the move, carried into battles, paraded in rituals, and even placed in tents. Not exactly the life of a stable electrical device. And as for claims from people like David Hatcher Childress, who has painted the Ark as an advanced machine that could fly bolts of lightning and possibly link humanity with beings from beyond Earth, entertaining? Absolutely plausible. Not really. Scientists simply apply Occam's razor here, trimming away the extravagant claims in favor of simpler explanations. Civilizations like Egypt built extraordinary things, yes, but the evidence shows long periods of development, not sudden alien intervention. By that logic, the Ark can be understood as part of human culture, not the hardware of an extraterrestrial lab. When I step back from all these theories, from the sober arguments of scholars to the wilder leaps of imagination, I notice something striking. The critics make good points. They remind us that the Ark, if it ever existed, was a product of its time. They point out how religious reforms could have erased it from history, how physics undercuts the idea of it being a supercharged capacitor, and how extraterrestrial explanations complicate what might be far simpler. On paper, it sounds convincing, and I find myself nodding along more often than not. Yet, the mystery never really fades, does it? Even when the wildest claims are stripped away, the Ark still leaves questions that refuse to be fully resolved. Maybe it is because the object itself, as described in the texts, carried such weight for the people of its time. Maybe it is because power, whether spiritual or symbolic, has always found its way into physical forms that humans can touch, fear, and revere. I cannot help but wonder if the Ark was less about the gold and acacia wood and more about the belief that it contained the very presence of God. And belief, after all, can be as powerful as any weapon or machine. The story of the Ark of the Covenant is a labyrinth where history, faith, and myth converge, only to dissolve into a final, impenetrable silence. It is a narrative that begins with divine blueprints and thunderous power, only to end with a void, an empty space in the historical record where the most sacred object of an entire civilization simply vanishes. The quest to uncover its fate, whether through the lens of archaeology, theology, or fringe science, ultimately reveals less about the fate of a gold-plated chest and more about our own perpetual search for meaning, for a tangible connection to the divine, and for evidence that our world is touched by forces beyond our understanding. The biblical account presents the Ark in stark, powerful terms. It is the literal throne of an invisible God, a conduit for cosmic power that could part rivers, shatter fortifications, and annihilate those who approached it with impurity. This was not merely a symbol, it was a weapon and a beacon, the very heart of Israel's identity. Its sudden disappearance following the Babylonian destruction of the First Temple is therefore not a minor historical footnote, but a theological cataclysm. The fact that it is absent from the meticulous Babylonian loot lists suggests a profound truth. Either it was destroyed so completely that no trace remained, or it was hidden with such supreme care that its location became a secret lost to time. This void has become a canvas upon which every generation has painted its own hopes, fears, and theories. The technological hypotheses, from the capacitor theory to ancient alien intervention, represent a modern attempt to rationalize the fire from heaven. They translate divine wrath into electrical discharge and angelic guardians into safety protocols. While these ideas are compelling in their ingenuity, they often stretch plausibility to its breaking point, requiring a suspension of disbelief that rivals faith itself. The scientific critiques are potent. A capacitor of that size could not accumulate such lethal charges under nomadic conditions, and the leap to extraterrestrial origins, while solving one mystery, creates a dozen more that are even less verifiable. Yet, the enduring appeal of these theories underscores a fundamental human impulse to find a logical, material explanation for the miraculous, to demystify the sacred and recast it in the language of our time. The claims of discovery, from Ron Wyatt's divinely guided excavation to Ethiopia's sacred guardianship, fill the historical silence with dramatic, albeit unverifiable, narratives. Wyatt's story, with its angelic guardians and the blood of Christ, satisfies a deep yearning for a prophetic, revelatory climax to the mystery. However, its lack of empirical evidence, its shifting details, and its rejection by the scholarly community mark it as a powerful modern legend rather than a historical discovery. Similarly, the Ethiopian tradition, enshrined in the national epic of the Kebra Nagast, offers a beautiful and coherent narrative of divine favor transferred to a new Zion. But its foundation in medieval political theology and the absolute secrecy surrounding the relic and axiom place it firmly in the realm of powerful belief, a realm that is immune to archaeological confirmation or denial. These competing claims are less about evidence and more about identity, legitimacy, and the ownership of sacred history. When we strip away the speculative technologies and the unverified claims of discovery, we are left with the core historical and theological probabilities. The most plausible scenarios are often the most mundane. The Ark was likely captured and melted down for its priceless gold by the Babylonians, its destruction so total and humiliating that it was omitted from the biblical record, or it was hidden in a forgotten tunnel beneath Jerusalem by priests who took its secret to their graves, a secret now buried under millennia of rubble and political strife. From a theological perspective, its disappearance can be seen as a necessary evolution. The transition from a God localized in a box of gold to a universal spirit present everywhere. The prophets themselves began this shift, speaking of a God who desired mercy, not sacrifice, and a law written on human hearts, not just on stone tablets. In the final analysis, the true power of the Ark of the Covenant may never have resided in its physical properties, whether wood, gold, or hypothetical energy fields. Its ultimate power lies in its enduring mystery. It is a perfect cultural and religious archetype, a MacGuffin of divine proportions that continues to captivate the human imagination. It represents the ultimate lost treasure, the ultimate secret knowledge, and the ultimate symbol of a direct, palpable connection to the divine. The search for the Ark is a proxy for the search for God, for certainty in an uncertain world, and for proof that the stories which form the bedrock of our civilization are literally, physically true. Therefore, the Ark is not lost. It has simply transformed. It has migrated from a physical object to an indelible idea. It lives on in the rituals of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, in the fevered dreams of explorers, in the pages of scholarly debates, and in the collective imagination of our culture, immortalized by cinema and literature. Its absence is, in a way, more powerful than its presence ever could have been. For as long as its fate remains a mystery, it continues to ask the most profound questions. What is the nature of the sacred? How do we relate to the divine? And are we, as a species, ever truly satisfied with the answers we are given? The Ark of the Covenant is gone, but the quest it inspired, the awe it commands, and the mystery it embodies are very much alive. The eternal echo of the Ark. Centuries have passed since the Ark of the Covenant last revealed itself to human eyes. Empires have risen and fallen, faiths have merged and divided, yet across the shifting sands of time, the Ark's shadow endures, an eternal whisper from the dawn of civilization. It is as if the artifact itself transcends history, living not in the temples of stone but in the temples of human imagination. From the deserts of Sinai to the mountains of Ethiopia, the Ark's trail weaves through our collective consciousness, always just beyond reach. Some say it was taken by priests to protect it from Babylon's wrath. Others claim it was hidden deep beneath the Temple Mount, buried in the catacombs that even modern archaeologists dare not enter. In the highlands of Axum, monks still guard a mysterious relic behind veils of secrecy, refusing the world even a single glimpse. Whether truth or legend, their devotion speaks volumes, for the Ark, even unseen, commands reverence. But perhaps the Ark was never meant to be found. Maybe its power, the divine fire, the unearthly radiation, the voice that once spoke between the cherubim, was too great for mortal hands. Each time humanity reaches for it, calamity seems to follow. Armies fall, kingdoms collapse, curses awaken. Could it be that the Ark is not a relic to possess, but a lesson to understand? When the ancient scribes described a chest of gold containing tablets of divine law, they may have been encoding more than theology, perhaps a memory of a technology so advanced it appeared as magic. Some researchers have dared to ask if the Ark was a kind of reactor, a device capable of channeling immense energy. Others see it as an interdimensional key, a conduit between our realm and the divine. Whatever it was, those who stood before it spoke of light, thunder, and a presence that defied explanation. The Ark has always been a paradox. It blesses those who honor it and destroys those who defy it. That duality mirrors the nature of knowledge itself. Every civilization that has touched the unknown has faced a choice, to use it for creation or for conquest. The Ark, perhaps, is a reflection of that eternal test. When Moses ascended Mount Sinai, he did not just return with commandments, he returned with a covenant. It was a pact between the divine and the mortal, a bridge between infinite wisdom and fragile flesh. The Ark became the vessel of that covenant, a physical manifestation of humanity's longing to connect with the source of creation. And yet, over time, the covenant faded. Wars, greed, and dogma buried the original message beneath centuries of ritual and fear. In truth, the Ark's disappearance may have been its salvation. Had it remained visible, mankind might have destroyed itself, trying to harness its power. Hidden away, it continues to exist beyond corruption, a reminder that not all treasures are meant to be possessed. And still, its influence lingers. Modern researchers studying electromagnetic phenomena and ancient acoustics have noticed patterns that resemble the Ark's described effects. Pilgrims who visit supposed resting places of the Ark speak of a subtle vibration in the air, a sense of awe that transcends reason. Even in the digital age, where myth should have no power, the Ark continues to haunt our dreams. Why? Because the Ark represents more than an artifact. It is the symbol of divine communication, the idea that the universe itself is speaking to us if only we learn to listen. Whether it is the voice of God, the hum of lost technology, or the resonance of consciousness, the message is the same. The divine is within reach, but only for those who approach with humility and wisdom. Perhaps that is why every culture, from Egypt to Sumer to Israel, carried legends of sacred chests, radiant stones, and heavenly fire. The Ark may have many names and forms, but its essence is universal, a reminder of where we come from and what we have yet to become. In Ethiopia, the guardians of Axum say that when the world is ready, the Ark will reveal itself once more, not to one nation, but to all mankind. On that day, they say, humanity will stand at a crossroads. We will have to choose whether to repeat the cycle of pride and ruin, or to finally understand that true power is not in domination, but in alignment with the source that created all things. Until that day comes, the Ark remains hidden, perhaps beneath sand, perhaps within the human spirit. And maybe that is the greatest mystery of all. For in searching for the Ark, we may ultimately be searching for ourselves, the divine spark within, the covenant written not on stone, but in the soul. So the story of the Ark of the Covenant does not end. It echoes across time, across belief, across the silence between heartbeats. Its legend endures because it asks a question humanity still cannot answer. What will we do when the divine once again touches the earth? And maybe, just maybe, the Ark is waiting for our answer. In the end, perhaps the Ark was never a box of gold or a relic of the past, but a mirror reflecting the soul of humanity and our endless pursuit of the divine. It is the voice that calls from within the silence, urging us to remember what we once knew, that creation itself is sacred, that power without wisdom destroys, and that the true covenant has always been between the Creator and the created. The Ark may still lie buried beneath stone and sand, but its light endures, not in temples or treasures, but in the hearts of those who dare to seek truth without fear. And one day, when humanity is finally ready to wield knowledge with compassion, the Ark will no longer need to be found, for it will rise again, not from the earth, but from within us. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.